exciting news. Season 3 of Meet the Redmonds podcast launches June 2nd. Join us, Marq and Bev Redmond, every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. EST on Facebook, YouTube, and OCPI TV for inspiring conversations about faith, family, and marriage.
Hey, everybody, it's Marq.
And it's Bev.
And we are the Redmonds. And as you see, we're a little bit delayed because we are across the country. I'm here in Chicago, and my wife is back in Seattle, and we're apart for the next, 3 weeks?
Weeks, yeah.
We're taking a little sabbatical to take care of some personal business. I'm taking care of the business of Chicago. My wife is holding it down, taking care of the business in Seattle. So we're going to do our episodes via Zoom for the next 3 weeks, but we are still together.
We're breathing energy. Yep.
Yeah. What was the skit on In Living Color when the older couple, they would argue and fight, and then finally at the end they would say, but we're still together.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to tell our audience today, Bev, what is our episode about?
We are on episode 6 of Meet the Redmonds, and we're talking about nepotism. And specifically, we're going to turn it a little churchy, a little faith-based, and we're talking about nepotism in the church. Is it really a good thing, or is it a bad thing? We were inspired by our love of sports, and we watched the NBA draft most recently with LeBron and his son, Bronny James, who has now made his way to the NBA. And more importantly, they're on the same team. Is that nepotism at its finest, or is it nepotism at its worst? And then when we get a little further in the show, we're going to say, is that okay in church too? What you think?
Once we saw it, we were like, well, you know what? We've seen enough nepotism in the church that we can kind of make what Bronny and LeBron have done, and we kind of can translate that to what we've seen in our church walk throughout all of our lives.
Yes.
So, and we have been helped out by nepotism, as sure as some of you all have been helped out by nepotism. You've helped your son, your daughter, or maybe your mother or father helped you out to get where you are. So I kind of want to dispel the myth that it's a bad thing. You know, you think of LeBron and Bronny, you think of Joe and Hunter Biden, you think of the Kennedys, you think of some big corporations that have passed down the business to siblings or children. So nepotism happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. It does happen all the time. I think of my Uncle Howard, God rest his soul, at this particular point. He was a locksmith, and he had his store, and it was called Smith & Sons or Howard & Sons. He always had in mind that his son would join us and join in the family business. So I'm going to rewind it. Even past Hunter Biden, Joe, we are Black people. In our history, we didn't have a lot of legacy, or people to reach out to for jobs, for other things. So if we didn't do it for ourselves and in our community, how did we get ahead? So is nepotism really bad, babe?
I don't think so. Nepotism got me started in my teaching career. My mother was a principal, longtime teacher at a school which was right down the street from my high school. And she knew my assistant principal, Mr. Gaston. Mr. Gaston was always calling Betty Redmond for something I done did in the hallway or some kind of mischievous act I was doing. So
not
they
you. Not you. No.
Oh, of course not me. So they gained a rapport. So one day, this is maybe 7, 8 years, I've graduated from college at the time. And my mother saw Mr. Gaston in the store. So Mr. Gaston said, how's Redmond doing? What is he doing? Blah, blah, blah. My mom said he just graduated. Mr. Gaston said, tell him to call me this evening. That was on a Friday. He told me to come to his school on a Monday And he put me in the classroom, and I was there for 3 years. I never went. I never went down to HR. I don't remember signing anything. He said, "Just give me your social and your date of birth," and that was it. But this was back in the day where principals, had a whole lot of power. Mm-hmm. So this was, I want to say 94, 95. And when Mr. Gaston retired, he made a call to a principal friend of his, told her, "I got this young dynamic teacher. I'm leaving. I want to put him on with you." I went to the West Side, met with Miss Betty Green, the principal of Herzl. We talked. She said, "Okay, Mr. Redmond, I'll see you in August." And I was at Herzl for another 5-6 years.
Oh, we all have stories of how we've been helped. My dad, often employed, my dad has had a variety of jobs throughout his career, but he always made sure that we were taken care of, whether it was summer jobs, whether it was part-time or something. He was always looking for us to gain some skills and also help him out. So, and then we also had a church. We were the teachers, the praise leaders, the drummer, the choir director, the custodians. We played all of those roles back in the day. And some might have said, well, all you use is your family. Well, who else are you supposed to use?
When I was teaching at Upward Bound, our daughter, Noelle, she was way too young to be in the program. She was still in grammar school. This was a program for high school. I put her on so she can go on the college tours and experience, what it is to, go to different college tours and everything. Mm-hmm. I did that because she's my daughter.
Yes. So we're agreeing that what happened with LeBron and Bronny, not the worst thing in the world.
No, not the worst thing in the world.
I agree. It's not the worst thing in the world. And truly, I would say it would be, the bad part about it is if he were not good at what he does. Bronny has put in the work. He's put in the effort. If other people are being overlooked, that's another conversation. But he certainly is diligent at his craft. I don't know that he will go the distance in his career like his dad is and has, but history will prove us right or wrong on this one. I think not a bad thing. He's opening doors. He's making history, and the real beneficiary is the Lakers.
I would feel bad if LeBron didn't help his son out.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you help your child? We've just never been able to witness it maybe as real time as this, and we've not witnessed it in basketball, and I don't know if any other sport has seen this. So, and certainly as people of color, we don't get to see this often. So,
well, I think of Ken Griffey Jr. and Sr., but Ken Griffey Jr. was that dude. It wasn't like Dad was helping him out. He was a huge prospect. Mm-hmm. And he just happened to play on the Mariners with his dad. So that's a case of nepotism. I don't know if it's nepotism because maybe Griffey Jr. Mm-hmm. extended the career of Griffey Sr. because the son was that good.
Just so you can. So I think of it this way. The door is open. What you do with that open door is up to you. My thoughts.
Mm-hmm. So, going into the church arena, we have seen cases of nepotism. A pastor steps down, his son takes over, mm-hmm. or daughter in some cases, and we have some pros and cons to that. And our goal is hopefully we can get a part 2 out of this down the road, because I know some people that are legacy pastors, from pastor to current pastor to son coming up in the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen that. We've seen that in our church in Seattle with Pastor Manaway and his son, Pastor Joe. So we want to pick these people's brains just to see how they have dealt with it. Do they think it's a problem? Have there been advantages? Have there been disadvantages?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to get a part 2 out of this.
Mm-hmm. When I think of Pastor Joe and Pastor Manaway, they seem to complement each other, and they seem to enjoy each other in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have defined roles in the church. Yes, our pastor, Pastor Manaway, Robert L. Manaway, is the senior pastor, or the executive pastor, but Joe also has a lane in the church too. He's more over the youth. He handles a lot of the administrative things going on in the church, and he also does a lot of traveling on his own and developing a lot of his own connections. So I don't know if there's a problem, it's because other people are bringing the problem.
Okay. So, talking about nepotism, let's do the pros, and then we'll do the cons.
Yep.
And then we'll bring it all together.
Yes.
So, number 1, what do you think is a pro of nepotism in the church? Now, we're thinking specifically of pastors, but we're going to broaden the scope and say it could be praise leaders, it can be people in administrative roles in the church. What do you think is an advantage of nepotism in the church?
One is longevity and legacy, that you get to see a family's growth over time, and you get to see how the Lord uses and blesses a particular group throughout the eras. And if you go into the Bible and take a look, especially in the Old Testament, you can see, and so-and-so begot so-and-so, and begot so-and-so, and begot so-and-so. And they're passing down blessings from generation to generation. I'm thinking of, I think it's Isaac in his older years, where he blessed his sons, and that began and launched many nations from them. We think of Jacob mostly being Israel, but all of the children, when we think of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they talked a lot about generational blessing.
So you think, number 1,
longevity.
A pro of nepotism is longevity.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go with another pro of nepotism. I think it promotes continuity, a sense of stability. You just mentioned Moses and then Joshua, or who did you mention just a second ago?
I mentioned a couple of people. I mentioned Abraham, Isaac,
and Jacob. Right. I don't know where I got Moses and Joshua from, but they weren't related, so.
They were not.
And see what happens when we're not together? My mind wanders.
It was all good. I'm trying to think of, okay, who did the crosshand blessing? I'm thinking of a lot of things. You're thinking of other leaders. We're human. So.
Right. But it keeps continuity.
Yeah.
Consistency. So I think that would be another pro/advantage of nepotism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Often we grow up with those individuals, that generational, that continuity. So I think you're right that it gives the church a chance to flourish from generation to generation and know something that it can count on. The other thing that I would say is it's a joy in many cases to work with your family.
What did you say the first one was? Longevity? The second one I said was consistency. The third one you said is, being around your family. It's a joy.
It's a joy.
Can we think of one more positive of nepotism?
One more positive of nepotism. Institutional knowledge, is that the same as consistency?
Okay, elaborate.
So, you know how you tell your family history, your lineage, but also there is just the tradition that goes on in the church, the way you do things. That institutional knowledge goes on from family to family. When you bring someone from the outside, and I'm not saying that recruiting from the outside is necessarily bad, we can have that conversation, but you know how things are done. And
preservation? You want to call it preservation?
You can call it preservation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Developing tradition.
Okay. Now, so we got our four. We got longevity. We got consistency. We got working with family.
Mm-hmm.
Familiarity.
Yes.
And we have legacy or tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what are some cons of nepotism?
Well, what if you get a railhead, relative in there?
You get a knucklehead.
A knucklehead follow you. Dad or mom could have been great. Maybe uncle was awesome. And then here comes Junior and Juniette. And
everything up.
Nope. They're gambling with the money. They're doing all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So I would call that ill-prepared.
They're not equally yoked. Their dedication to the ministry may not be the same.
Lack of dedication.
Yes, and lack of reverence. Just because your dad did something or your mom did something doesn't make you automatically a great leader.
Absolutely. They can come in. Well, you know what? All of that, you wrap that in. You can wrap in taking advantage of what has been left to you. So we can wrap that all up and just say lack of dedication.
I have another one.
What's that? This is number 2.
Comparison. Always be compared to your father, your mother, or whoever that person is. You don't do things like your mom did. You don't do things like your dad. He would never.
I think I told you about this when me and Kevin came up to the church and a member said something. Now, mind you, my mom has been passed away almost 10 years. And this dude said something about my mother would not appreciate or something he said. And it rubbed me such the wrong way. If Kevin wasn't there, I may have lost my cool.
Yes, it lit a fuse.
And, you see that even for people who have grown up in the church and they've gone away and they come back and people want to say, oh, this, that, and the other. I remember when, or I used to do this, or I remember when you were. All those conversations just makes my blood boil.
And your mom or your dad, they did this, and you're doing something different. So comparison is really, really tough.
Okay. Now when people say, "Oh, you look just like your dad," or those things, that's cool.
It's heartwarming. Yeah.
Right. But when you say, "Well, your mother did this, and you are not living up to expectations," that would make me go off on somebody. My Christianity goes right out the door when that happens.
Your whole faith?
All of it. I get it back, but I lose it at that moment.
We'll break it back in. All right, so comparison, do you have another one?
We said lack of dedication, comparison, stagnation.
True.
You don't want to make any changes.
Or you're afraid to make the changes because people are so beholden to the way that person did them. And heaven forbid, if you have an emeritus situation where they're still there.
Oh, my. Oh. Preach,
yeah.
preach. We've seen that happen. We know what that is.
There's the de facto pastor.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll have factions over here. You'll have factions over there. Oh, boy, that could be hard.
Now, without nepotism, we have seen, even in our, I'm not going to say the church because everybody I know, but because they may sometimes watch us, we have seen without nepotism, if you tried to move a pew, move the the ceremonial Bible that is on the communion table,
the church covenant on the wall.
Ooh.
That was a big thing, remember?
Someone
moved the church covenant off the wall, and people went ballistic.
We had to have church meetings about those small things. And that wasn't a nepotism situation, but it's compounded when you may be trying to lead in a different way.
Sometimes it's very unfair to compare elder with son.
Mm-hmm. So that comparison, that stagnation can happen. Any other cons?
Cons of nepotism. We said lack of dedication. We said stagnation. What else did we say? We said, help me out, baby.
One of the things that I'm thinking of now, this is a gender thing. I typically see nepotism happening in the church with pastors and male figures.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if it goes to a daughter?
True.
Mm.
True.
So, inequity. So, will the same grace be given or opportunity be given if it's a daughter versus a son?
Okay, so equity.
Equity.
You want to use that? Well, here's another point that you said. The daughter marries a man that is also in the ministry, and your son-in-law now gets preferential treatment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he's not really family. He married into the family, or she married into the family. There's a lot. So those, what do you call it? The family tree, those limbs get shaky at points in times. So can be a con. Now, here's another one. When there's conflict in the family versus the church, or in the church too, you can have a lot of upheaval. We tried as much as we could, but sometimes church came home with us all the time. Sometimes there were people coming to stay with us. Sometimes we gave out more money than we actually took in. Mm-hmm. And it's not the easiest road to have that legacy passed on to you. Mm-hmm. What happens if the recipient or the inheritance outpaces the gift of the original?
Oh, wow.
And there's more growth under the son or daughter or the receiving family member than there was under the original.
So you want to call that expectations?
Exceeding expectations?
Exceeding or not meeting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It could be decline, too. We were thunderous under dad or thunderous under mom, and now you come along and things go, we're losing members.
Mm-hmm.
They fighting in the cafeteria, all the things. Yep.
They're fighting in the fellowship hall. Boy. And you know what? We're really trying to stay away from naming names and naming pastors because we've seen this.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen it firsthand. We know some people who are going through it right now.
I mean, family rifts and tiffs, that can really rock the ministry. Yep. Any others?
I don't know. We covered the pros and cons of nepotism. And you brought up the daughters as well.
That inequity. Now, we're talking typically, right now we're talking about a pastorate, but you can see, we have an example when you were mentioning, the father, the son, and now the third.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're different roles. What if my gift is not preaching, but it is praise or it's administration? So it doesn't this goes back to, I think, the positive column, that it just doesn't have to be one way to pay back or to live as a legacy in your church. You can find your lane and carve out that path and bring just as much honor to your family member. It doesn't always have to be square on in the pulpit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow.
There's some kiddos, they're out there in the parking lot ministry doing big things.
Yeah.
Parking your bins. They're learning.
And you know what?
True.
We want to also address that nepotism just doesn't mean parent to child. It could mean husband and wife.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, our faith. This is one thing that happens in churches where you have the co-pastorate.
Yeah.
Yes. So where we'll talk about that equity issue, where the wife is serving as a pastor alongside her husband.
How do you feel about that? Because I got some thoughts on that. I'm not going to go too deep because I don't want people coming after me. But
they will come after you. Go ahead.
I always felt kind of odd about that.
Why?
I want to talk to pastor. I want to talk to co-pastor.
You talk to co-pastor?
I don't know. Sometimes that's a little a gray area for me.
It's a gray area for you? It's new.
It's newer.
It's newer.
Really didn't hear about this. Didn't hear about it in the 80s. Maybe not even in the 90s. Too tough. This is a newer thing.
As the female part of this, let's just say you were Pastor Marq. Would I want to be a traditional first lady? There are some wives that come in with gifts as well as their husband does. So how do you make room for them? And I do think you can accomplish a lot whether you're in the first lady role. I'm a big fan of first ladies out there. You can do as much in that role. It's a title. You can expand that. Yeah.
To me, I always think that it blurs the lines. It teeters on, whose lane is whose. You got the co-pastor, you got the pastor. Both are making decisions. It's a gray area. The co-pastor thing, it just blurs lines too much.
I'm your co-pilot.
That's different. A co-pilot is different than a co-pastor.
You're still flying in the same direction.
Yeah, but you got just as much control over that plane as I do.
That's right.
So you think a co-pastor has just as much influence as the pastor?
If they're co-pastors, yes.
Oh, see, we're gonna have to table this and come back to this another time because I got definite feelings on that. And
co-pilot, yeah.
And I need some scriptural ammunition to help me out with this so I can combat what you're feeling about co-pastors and pastors. So we're going to get out of here. A very frustrated Marq Redmond. It's not my wife's way.
It's not my husband's way, even though he needs a co-pilot.
It's
little Redmond's way.
Exciting news. Season 3 of Meet the Redmonds podcast launches June 2nd. Join us, Marq and Bev Redmond, every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. EST on Facebook, YouTube, and OCPI TV for inspiring conversations about faith, family, and marriage.